She stood by the kitchen window, her fingers still damp from the morning dishes, the sunlight casting long, warm streaks across her bare shoulders, her silk robe slipping just slightly down her arm, and she didn't bother to fix it because she knew he would see her from behind and maybe he would notice her in the way she hadn't been noticed in so long. And that thought alone sent a slow wave of heat curling up her spine as she leaned forward just a little more, pretending to adjust the flowers in the vase even though they were fine, just fine. And she could feel his presence in the doorway, his breath soft, his voice a low hum as he said, "Good morning." But there was something in his tone, something that lingered longer than it should have, and she turned just enough to catch the flicker in his eyes, the hesitation, the hunger so quickly masked behind polite smiles and safe distance. But the space between them was shrinking with each visit, each conversation, each accidental touch that lasted half a second too long, and when he reached to grab his coffee, she let her fingers brush his hand and neither of them pulled away, and time slowed like thick honey in summer air and her heart beat faster, louder, bolder, because this was wrong, all kinds of wrong. And yet her body betrayed her morals, and her breath caught in her throat, as he looked at her, really looked at her, and she saw it clear as day. The conflict, the need, the test of loyalty etched in every line of his jaw, and she whispered his name soft as a prayer barely audible, and he whispered hers back with a reverence that made her knees weaken. And suddenly the house felt too quiet, too warm, too full of possibilities. They both knew they shouldn't entertain, but neither one moved. Neither one spoke, and the silence between them became a living thing. A pulse, a promise, an invitation. And when he took a single step toward her, she didn't step back. She let him come closer until they shared the same breath, and his hand rose, slow, hesitant, like he was waiting for her to stop him. But she didn't. She couldn't. And when his fingers finally touched her cheek, her world tilted, her thoughts scattered, and she closed her eyes, not in shame, but in surrender. And then his lips were on hers, and the dam broke. Her lips were soft, warm, tasting like morning tea and something sweeter, something he couldn't name. And the way she clung to him like a secret begging not to be kept made his chest ache with 1,000 thoughts racing, none of them loud enough to stop him. Her hands now in his hair, fingers threading through like they had always belonged there, and he pressed her back against the kitchen counter, her robe slipping more, revealing soft skin that seemed to glow in the sunlight, and he kissed along her neck slow like he was memorizing her every breath, and she sighed into him, breathless and wanting and lost. Because this was real. This was happening, and every inch of her cried out for more, for touch, for connection, for something she hadn't felt in years, something her own husband had stopped giving her long ago. And when his lips found her shoulder, she tilted her head, giving him space, giving him permission, and his hands moved along her waist, down her hips, learning the shape of her like he'd dreamed of in silence for too long. And she whispered, "Don't stop," and he didn't. He couldn't. Not now. Not after feeling her melt against him like she was made for his arms, made for his hands, made for his mouth, and the soft moan she gave when he lifted her onto the counter burned into his memory as if etched by fire. And when he entered her slow, careful, reverent, they both gasped as if something sacred had just happened, and in a way it had, because this was not just lust, this was need. This was loneliness. Meeting loneliness and creating heat where there had once been cold time blurred around them, the clock ticking somewhere in the background forgotten. As the rhythm between them grew stronger, deeper, more urgent, and when they finally collapsed, tangled, breathless, sweaty, her head on his chest, his fingers still stroking her hair, something shifted. Something unspoken passed between them. A truth they both understood but dared not say. Days passed with stolen glances, secret smiles, moments that tasted of danger and longing, and every time he visited again, she found herself dressing just a little differently, lingering in the hallway just a little longer, and he kept coming back. Not just for her, but because the house now felt like a heartbeat. His own home no longer had, and they talked about everything and nothing. They shared stories, old wounds, they laughed, and sometimes they just sat in silence, wrapped in the comfort of knowing someone truly saw them. But behind every touch, every whisper, every look was the shadow of her daughter, the woman he had promised to love, the woman who trusted him, and that truth clawed at him at night when the guilt became too loud. And he wondered how long they could go on like this, how long they could hide the truth. It all came to a head one evening when the rain poured hard against the windows, thunder rumbling in the distance, and she opened the door with a look in her eyes that said everything and nothing, and he stepped inside without a word soaked from the storm, and she pulled him close, kissed him like the world was ending, and maybe in some way it was, and they fell into each other again, hearts wild hands, desperate bodies speaking louder than words ever could, and afterward, as the rain softened, she sat beside him on the couch wrapped in a blanket, both of them staring at nothing, and she finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "We can't keep doing this," and he nodded slowly. Pain etched deep in his features. "I know, but I don't know how to stop," and she looked at him, her eyes filled with everything she hadn't said until now. "Then maybe we don't stop. Maybe we just face the consequences." The next morning she told her daughter everything, every detail, every truth, every tear, and the silence that followed was colder than any winter she had ever known, and her daughter left without a word, her heart broken, her trust shattered, and the man, once caught between two women, now found himself standing alone in the aftermath of choices made under the spell of something too strong to fight. Weeks passed, months, seasons changed, and the house no longer felt warm, not even in summer, and she walked through rooms haunted by memory, by echoes of laughter and moans and whispered names, and one morning as she stood again by the same kitchen window, her robe falling from her shoulder, just like before, she wondered if it had been worth it, if passion was ever enough to pay the price of family lost. He came back once, just once, standing at the doorway, eyes heavy with the weight of everything they'd been and everything they'd broken. And he said, "I still think about you every night," and she looked at him, her heart twisting, and said, "I know. But some lines once crossed can't ever be redrawn," and he nodded, turned, and left. She never saw him again. But sometimes late at night, when the world was quiet and the stars blinked down like secrets, she would close her eyes and remember his touch, his breath, the way they once made love, like they were the only two people alive. And for a moment, just a moment, she would let herself feel it again. And then she would sleep alone. Because some stories are beautiful and broken and real, and not every love story ends in forever. Some just live on in memory.